Today I'm going to be talking about plastic pollution in our waters. So who here lives near a body of water, whether it's a stream or a lake or an ocean? Okay. Who here has plumbing with water in it?
Ooh.
Okay, so most people in here, you don't, that's a problem. So you all have access to water around you all the time during the day. So today I want to educate you on how the products that we buy with plastic in them actually harm the ecosystem that aquatic animals live in. So I'm going to look at three different parts of bodies of water. I'm going to look at the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, if you've ever heard of it. I'm going to look at Chesapeake Bay for a quick moment, and then I'm going to come closer to home with the Great Lakes. So the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, if you can see here on the eastern side by California, is a mass of garbage that's collected in the ocean. And the reason this happens is different ocean currents all gather there, so all of this trash comes into one spot. And according to NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, this patch is roughly the size of Texas. So this is a mass of garbage. It's not visible above the water, it's actually just below the water, and it's going to be consumed of plastic, rope. You can actually go out there and you can see televisions, you can see tires, and this is actually very deadly for sea life because they become entangled in it or they consume it and then they end up dying. So for an example, this is what the Pacific Garbage Patch looks like above. So you don't see anything out of the ordinary, it looks pretty calm, you see birds. So the resources that I'm going to show you about the Garbage Patch come from the Five Gyres Institute, which the Five Gyres Institute studies these specific patches of garbage in the ocean where the currents come together. And it's based out of Los Angeles. This is an example of an albatross that has died from consuming plastic in the garbage patch. And after it's decomposed, you can see the contents of its stomach. So you see bottle caps, you see other pieces of plastic that killed the bird. You can also see another example of an albatross. This is a Midway Island in the Pacific. So this is going to be more towards the western side, or the western side of the Pacific, towards China and Japan and their garbage patch. And this is an example of a trough that went through the sand and picked up these sediment particles. So you see that a lot of the sediment is made out of plastic pieces. And the reason I wanted to show you this is the large pieces aren't actually the dangerous ones. The smaller they are, the more dangerous they are to the marine life. So jumping to Chesapeake Bay, in the news recently, and about a year ago, according to, hold on, I just lost it. Okay, National Geographic, a sei whale, which is an endangered species, was going through the tributary access to Chesapeake Bay, and was later found dead after consuming a shard of plastic DVD case that lacerated its stomach and didn't allow it to eat and ended up dying. This is an example of a larger mammal being affected. There isn't going to be a ton of large mammals affected, it's mainly going to be sea turtles and birds. Those are the ocean ones that get affected a lot, or seals. So going to the Great Lakes, which is going to be closer to home for all of us. So does anyone know what these little beads are called? Because most of us use them on a daily basis. So they're called microbeads. So they're in most of our face wash and soap products. So those little plastic particles that you get in your soap and face wash, this is what they do. So they accumulate in our Great Lakes because when you flush it down the drain, it eventually ends up in our water. So what I'm going to show you is an example. So in 2012, a chemistry professor from the State University of New York in Fredonia took 20 graduate students out onto the Great Lakes, and they took 21 samples throughout the lake, trying to see how many micro particles of plastic they could find. They found roughly 450,000 particles per square kilometer on the bottom of the lakes. So those particles are the most dangerous parts for the marine life in the water. So I'm going to show you the life of a microplastic particle, and we'll just see how it gets used in our products. So this is a bottle of face wash, okay? So these little black dots are microparticles. The average tube of facial cleanser contains 330,000 of these particles. This is according to the Five Gyres Institute. Moving on, next you'll probably use it and it'll go down the drain, which eventually the drains go into water filtration plants where they try to get all the pollutants and any kind of particles out of the water, but because these are so small and because of their buoyancy, they're not going to be filtered out. They're going to get through and eventually end up in our waterways. So eventually it'll be drained into our bodies of water, whether it's a lake or a stream. It's all going to run into whatever tributary it centers on. And most of them are going to end up in the Great Lakes if you live on the northern edge of the tributary. So the northern tributary is actually about 30 minutes north of here. You get the divide where the water will go into the Great Lakes. Right now it's going to go towards the Gulf. So just a little bit north of us, you'll get into the Great Lakes tributary. So again, out of these samples that these graduate students took, they found 450,000 particles per square kilometer. So that's a lot of particles. And the reason these are so dangerous is because once these plastic particles enter the water, they actually absorb toxins. And these toxins are known to cause cancer, they're known to cause other health ailments, and once these plastics absorb these particles, they will eventually get eaten by cute little fish. And this fish, once it digests one of these particles, this particle will be in its stomach and in digestive tract for 24 to 36 hours. So you're looking at that amount of time for these chemicals to leak into the fish and be digested. So whether this fish will accumulate enough of these particles in its stomach where the toxins kill it or it becomes ill depends on the time it's alive. Now these particles will affect every stage of the food chain in the lakes. So if the fish gets eaten by a bird, then it'll affect the bird. But most likely the bird isn't going to get ate by a human. So the other fact is the fish that don't get ate by birds or other predatory animals get eaten by humans. So in a study by the 5 Guys, found that 1/4 of all fish sold in California markets contain microplastics in their intestines. So those fish all have contaminants that are leaking into their bodies as they digest them, and then humans are eating them later on. So it's possible for each stage of the wildlife in the water to accumulate toxins from these plastics. So again, if a bird gets a hold of the fish, then it's going to affect the bird, and then whatever predator goes after the bird. It might end there, but it's going to go up the food chain filling with toxins. So this is a chart showing where the most concentrated particles of microbeads are. Now, this group, they went into these 3 lakes. They didn't go into Ontario or Michigan. According to the Alliance for the Great Lakes, which is an organization that focuses on pollution in the Great Lakes and maintaining the health of that ecosystem, Michigan, Lake Michigan specifically, is getting far worse very rapidly. You're looking at down by the Chicago area and the Indiana side of Lake Michigan, where all of the currents kind of gather in that corner, you're getting massive accumulations of plastic, whether it's small or large. So you're going to have more and more of this building up because every tube of face wash, on average, is going to contain 330 particles, 30,000 particles. So this is just going to keep accumulating. And it's very difficult for anybody to filter these out because they're so tiny. So it's hard to protect the wildlife from these particles. So here's an example of a fish after they cut it open and they found the particles in its intestine tract. Now, in response to these recent findings in the last 3 years, many cosmetic companies are moving towards cycling all of these products out of their production, which is good. And a lot of states around these massive bodies of water have started banning those products being sold in their states. These companies include L'Oreal. Procter & Gamble is working to get out of it by 2018, I believe. And other organizations like Bath & Body Works are still with these products. So what can you do to make a difference to help stop this? Well, first of all, you can, with larger plastic products, you can avoid getting plastic bags at the grocery store, which we have all heard that before, but these bags are known to end up in the water. And even if you lose it here, it can end up in the ocean where it's been found to kill sea turtles and birds. Don't buy products with microbeads in them. You can join a coast cleanup, whether that's at Lake Michigan. The Great Lakes Alliance does a lot of work to help with that. And then you can also help take care of a local stream. The Center for Lakes and Streams here, they do a lot of work to help out with the ecosystems. And then you can also help make sure that only rainwater goes down storm drains. Try to keep plastic from going down drains because that's all going to end up in our water. And then you can also just recycle your plastic products properly. So here are 3 resources that you can use to get more information and just tips. So the 5 gyres, it focuses mainly on the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and those patches in the ocean. You can look at the Alliance for Great Lakes, which is going to focus on the Great Lakes. And then you have Center for Lakes and Streams, which is going to focus more on the local area. And these are my resources. What I wanted to tell you is that the goal of this wasn't to persuade you to stop using plastic. It was to persuade you to be more mindful of the products you purchase and how you use them and how you dispose of them. Because these microparticles that we don't think about always, they end up in our water one way or another, and they're killing off wildlife, and they're building up toxins in our food supply. So this is something that we all need to be aware of, and I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
All right. Chloe.
Okay, with a show of hands, how many people in here have friends that are involved in either sororities or fraternities at different colleges or universities? Okay, I know I have a handful of friends that are in sororities and frats at Purdue, IU, Ball State, all of them really. And even though I have heard really great stories that have come from their sororities and their sisterhood and their brotherhood, I've also heard stories that should never, ever be repeated to anyone else. And yeah, it's funny, but it's also terrifying. So, how many of you were interested in finding Greek life when you were searching for your future college? None of you. That's surprising. I actually wanted to be in Greek life, but I was actually terrified to actually get into it because of the stories that I had heard. The stories that I'd heard at public universities, I hadn't heard anything from like Belmont University, which is a private Christian school. Most of us have heard endless stories about Greek life from our friends and even news that shake us to our core or that make us appreciate being at a school that enforces no drinking rules. But today I don't want to focus on the risks and harms of having Greek life on college campuses, but the benefits of bringing it here to Grace College. I've spent numerous hours dedicated to finding research on Greek life, both pros and cons of having it, to be a part of the college experience, but most of my information that I'm going to share with you comes from research that has already been done on college campuses and written by many psychologists who have studied Greek life. Today I would like to share with you what I've learned while researching this topic. I'm going to talk about what Greek life really is, and I'm not going to stray away from the risks and harms of having it. And I'm also going to talk about why we should consider bringing it onto campus. There we go. So history. On December 5th, 1776, Phi Beta Kappa was created at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. And like most fraternities that we hear now, they had a motto, a ritual, a badge, principles of high idealism, a bond of friendship, and an urge to share the organization's values through the expansion to other campuses. This inspired a group of students at Union College in New York, and they formed the Kappa Alpha Society, which their purpose was to be with people, and it was more social than it was with the other one that was created. So with this, they created Sigma Phi, which was created March 4th, 1827, and Delta Phi, which was created November 17th, 1827. And with that, they created the Union Triad, which was a vehicle for moral and intellectual growth, they were hoping. Charges of hazing, alcohol abuse, and anti-intellectualism have challenged Greek societies to emphasize community service, scholarship programming, and responsible social events. Now that you have a better understanding of the background of Greek life and how it started, I want to talk more about the risks before I start talking about the benefits of having it. Oh, perfect. All right, the main one that we do know about is the drinking and everything that we hear with that. I did a lot of research, and this was the most known topic on why this is most affecting fraternities and sororities. Involvement in a frat or sorority is an important risk factor for heavy drinking and its consequences within college student populations. Those who want to be involved in alcohol in college tend to pursue Greek life because they know that Greek life will facilitate alcohol and encourage partying, which is really scary. I had a friend who actually was telling me about a party she went to, and a kid actually passed out and had to go to the hospital, like the ER, at the party. He was rushed there, and his stomach was pumped. And I think he was on probation in his own frat, like within the next week. But he doesn't party anymore because of that, and she's super scared to party now. And the next one we hear about a lot too is sexual assault. College men in social fraternities are more likely than other college male students to be hyper-masculine or adopt a hostile masculinity, which emphasizes sexual conquest of women as an important aspect of doing their gender or performing masculinity. And we hear about that often. Another concern was research found that simply living in a sorority and living in a sorority house significantly increases the likelihood of experiencing sexual assault while intoxicated. So that's like breaking your own safe place and knowing that there could be a possible sexual assault case happening. Now that you are aware of the actual risks and harms of having Greek life on our college campus, I now want to share why we should bring Greek life to Grace. Even though it does have many risks, there are a lot of benefits. Yeah. Get Greek life to Grace. I feel really passionate about this. I don't know why. I think it's cute to see my friends with their sisters posing and having fun at cool events like IUDM, which is the dance marathon. And I just think it would be really exciting to have it here. And these are the reasons why. First one is it would build more community within our community. So we have dorms, but I think that having sororities and fraternities would really emphasize finding new friends and getting out of your comfort zone and not hanging out with who you thought you would hang out with. Second one is events. We wouldn't have any more weekend boredom. We would actually have things to do. I hear it all around campus that there's nothing to do, and sometimes the most productive thing we do is eat food, honestly. So I think it would bring something to us. Another one is community connection to surrounding areas. If you think about it, sororities and fraternities have to do a lot of philanthropy events, and I think with that we can get to our surrounding areas and connect more with them. And this next one is kind of silly, but it is a great resume builder. And you wouldn't think that, but it actually is. The next one is rules. Like I shared with the sexual assault and drinking, we would not have that on campus because we would still be under covenant and still have no drinking rules. Next one is we would also strengthen Christian brotherhood and sisterhood. I think this would just be great. It would be like living in a dorm, but I think it would encourage more deep conversations and growth. And lastly, it would begin to change the stereotype that sororities and fraternities have. If we bring it to a small private Christian school, I think that we could start by changing the stereotype that it has of being gross, trashy, whatever. So yeah, these are the reasons I came up with. And here's the cool logo I made. Yeah. Today I got to share with you the start of Greek life, the risks, and also why we should bring it to Grace College. I hope that this presentation helps you consider and think about considering why we should bring it onto Grace campus and how helpful and beneficial it really could be. Thank you for your time.
On.
Good afternoon. My name is Meredith Matson, and today I would like to cover the topic of uncovering the gender wage gap with you all, with my clever title of "Paid Like a Girl," and you will understand as we go farther through the presentation what that title actually means. So, this statistic provided by the White House Equal Pay website says on average, full-time working women earn just 78 cents for every dollar a man earns. Well, when I practiced president was an Always campaign. Their campaign was titled Like a Girl, and in it, the campaign manager brings a variety of different women to the stage and asks them a variety of questions. Some of them are, one was being, show me what it looks like to run like a girl. And so a little boy or a little girl would come up and they would just run like really slow, like, I'm tired, oh my gosh, like, when can we stop? And then a series of other questions were, can you throw like a girl? And the individuals would come up, they'd pick up the ball and just, oh, ball only went right there. And just be like really sad, really pathetic, everything just showing complete weakness in every sense. And so the campaign manager asked individuals, why did you do that? Pretty much, like, do you feel like that was a demeaning action? Do you feel like you were empowered when you performed those actions of being like a girl? And all of them said no. If you asked me to do that like a boy, I would have put all my heart and soul and effort into that same action and actually achieved something, actually been successful at that action. So this campaign went to show that we stereotype people based on their gender. We do not treat each other equally, and that brings on this statistic that the average woman could lose hundreds of thousands of dollars over her lifetime due to the earnings gap. So if you watch the video, it really helps evoke emotion. We all know what it is like to feel disrespected or talked down to at some point in our lives. And watching that ad moves us emotionally. This feeling compounded by this statistic, we just ask ourselves, how can there be so much discrimination, especially in America, especially in a country that advertises freedom and equality in pursuit of happiness? So after I heard the statistic and was just thinking to myself, I began to research and see if this was actually true. I wanted to know, where did this statistic come from? And how is it not being addressed? So today I will be citing sources from journalists like Karen Agnes, who founded President of Network of Enlightened Women. Her writing has appeared in Forbes and other noteworthy magazines. Also Ashley Shao, who is a commentary writer for the Washington Examiner. And lastly, Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. He is a professor of psychology at the University of Toronto. He does many lectures and speaking engagements on equality, not just men and women gender, but across nationalities and ethnicities. So after I did a little bit of research and checked into these sources, I realized that the gender wage gap is actually not an issue at all. Rather, it has been disproven in three main ways. The first are genders are not equal due to their preferences. Men and women are entirely different people and should be treated as such. Also, those preferences influence our career choices. And lastly, those career choices influence the gap that we see today. So there are three key words from this statistic that I would like us to dive into. In order to really break down the statistic, you have to go in and research every element. So the first element would be gender. The second would be, what does it mean to be equal? And third is how that influences the gap that we see. So for the first one, we will be talking about gender. It is very important to understand what makes up a man and what makes up a woman at the very basic level. Not just what we see externally based on what we wear, or even in our behavior, but really at the cognitive level. What are our deep desires and what are our foundational elements that make us unique? So the first one is men. Men have a higher inclination towards ideas. They are more outward driven in topics like philosophy. They are industrious, but also are prone to be more aggressive than women. Females, on the other hand, tend to be more orderly. They tend to be more agreeable and structured. They desire a feeling of safety and belonging as opposed to men. And lastly, they struggle more in areas like depression and anxiety. Given I want to just point out that all of these statistics that I've been revealing are based on men and women as a whole. This isn't excluding those exceptions. This is talking to us as generalities. So going forward, Dr. Peterson of Toronto University posed a question in one of his lectures. He said, in order for there to be true gender equality in society, you would have to assume that men and women have identical interests and temperaments. And if they don't, should the government intervene? This would require a retraining not only in our perceptions, but our basic cognitive beliefs. We would have to be retrained not just what our girl thinks and what our boy thinks, but the things that we're innately born with would have to be changed. This would have to be a government-mandated restructuring of our minds. So our government over the past 20 years has tried to develop a social structure that makes men and women equal, and it actually has been pretty successful. In the past 20 years, there has been more opportunity given to women, and you can see that jobs have increased and more women are attending college, more women are entering male-dominated industries such as law and business. But also because they are mandating an equal opportunity system, they are also looking for a 50-50 ratio for men and women to be the same in careers across all bounds. So just to restate, true gender equality, according to the government, means a 50-50 ratio across all career fields. However, a statistic from the U.S. Census Bureau in 2011 reported that there were 3.5 million registered nurses, and women made up 3.2 million of those, while men only made up 330,000. In addition, a statistic from the National Girls Collaborative Project said women make up half of the total U.S. college-educated workforce, but only 29% of the science and engineering workforce. These occupations were not chosen because of limited opportunity, but because of an abundance of it. They were chosen because of gender preferences. In order for this kind of to come together, this was an analogy that really made sense in my mind. It is kind of a food analogy. I've been really into kind of diet and exercise and looking into counting my macronutrients. So, in order to have a fully healthy body, you need 3 main macronutrients. These would be your fats, your carbs, and your proteins. But they come in 3 different percentages, as you can see on the board. Also, these percentages are based on your body type and your activity level as well. So, as you look at the chart, you can see that fat is the highest at 40%, protein second highest at 35%, and carbs the lowest at 25%. So it is important to understand that all these 3 categories are so important in making sure we have optimal health, but they are not 50-50 ratios. They each have their own special entity that our body needs in order to function, even though they are at differing levels. So the same is true about men and women. You could label, say, men the protein and women the carbs. It doesn't matter that the ratio is not the same, it's that we still need that percentage in our body to be able to be totally healthy and happy. So now that you have a further understanding of gender differences and preferences, we will talk about how this affects our career choices and ultimately feeds into the perceived gender wage gap. So the reason for this gap is due to 3 main figures. First, men occupy nearly all dangerous jobs. 2, they take on longer hours than women. And women possess more part-time and flexible positions. So first off, men who work nearly all dangerous jobs, being construction, working in oil rigs, and things like that. They are risking life and limb for these jobs. Many men are paid excess amount of dollars because there is so much risk. And rightfully so, if you're put in a position where you could be injured on a daily basis or might not even come home that afternoon, it makes sense that you would be compensated more. In addition, in my research, there were countless stories of intelligent women who excelled in college, excelled in grad school, excelled in law school, and entered a high-paying job in a field of their study, and after a couple years of working up the corporate ladder, by the time they were 30, these jobs were requiring to work way more than 40 hours if they were to become a CEO of their company or to maintain the highest degree of management in their company. And most women were called, by the time they were in their mid-30s, that was just something that was not doable for them. There was no way that you could balance your work life and your home life. And home life was more important to them. As a whole, women would rather have family and kids than work 60 plus hours to keep kind of their coworkers or associates off their back from wanting to take over their position. So it's not by kind of a feeling of less than that they chose to work less, but it's a feeling of valuing something more that they sacrificed those hours for. So this brings me to my last point. Men choose to take on those full-time positions because men are more just dominant focused, as we saw earlier. They're more competitive focused, and they do not have the same value system as women do. They do not, as a whole, value to have a family and to develop their personal life as much as women do, so they're willing to sacrifice any kind of personal life for a full-time career. So, in a Forbes article, journalist Karen Agnes quoted a book titled The End of Men. It said the official Bureau of Labor Department statistics show that the median earnings of full-time female workers is 77% of the median earnings of full-time male workers. But this is very different than 70 cents on the dollar for doing the same work as men. Full-time at 35 hours a week versus 40 or more can create a very large wage gap, not just because they are working the same job, but they are working different hours. In conclusion, it is easy to get passionate when we see unjust statistics. I believe that the topic of discrimination is one that many Americans get really passionate and want to stand behind. However, what we have in determination and empowerment, we tend to lack in evaluation. I'm happy that I was able to share with you the truth that lies behind the gender wage gap statistic. Together, we were able to take a closer look at the subject of males and females, how they differ, and these unique characteristics that make up our economy in a healthy, balanced way. To quote one of my favorite professors in his commencement speech last year, we are all unique, but we are not all special.
On.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Trenton Osborne, and before I introduce my topic, I'd like to introduce my assistant here. This is Alex. He's going to be he's here for two purposes, actually. He's here as part of my visual aid because he's pretty, and he's also going to be my clicker for me. So, before I begin, I'd like to tell a story about the couple that's on the screen. This is a story of these people named Matt and Lindsay Paradiso, and their daughter Amara. In February of 2016, Lindsay Paradiso was 18 weeks pregnant with her daughter when the doctors discovered a mass on the baby's neck during a routine ultrasound. Lindsay had kept a blog during her pregnancy just so that her family could keep up on what was going on that we're out of town. And she said, the doctor told us it was in our best interest to terminate the pregnancy because her dying was pretty inevitable. We didn't want our baby to die. We wanted to give Amara a fighting chance. They planned to wait until Amara was viable at 27 weeks old to deliver her surgically so that doctors could operate on the tumor, which ensured the baby's best chance of survival. 30 weeks later, though, Lindsay got an MRI that confirmed their worst fears. The tumor had tripled in size and had grown over the baby's head, chest, lungs, and eyes, and it was inoperable. The doctors believed that the tumor would kill Amara before she was even 27 weeks old, at which point Lindsay would have to have a procedure called an exit procedure, which is very similar to a C-section. She would have to have the exit procedure, and Amara would die either way. She was either going to die in Lindsay, or she was going to die after the surgery. So Lindsay had to have the decision at the moment to go ahead and either abort the child or to let the child die inside of her and then have another surgery to have the baby removed. Click. I'm going to be speaking to you about being pro-choice and what that means. How this is relevant to you is that, well, you all live in the United States, and this is a hot topic in politics today. It was a big topic in the recent presidential election. Our far left extreme liberals typically stream being pro-choice and being pro-abortion, while the extreme right conservatives are streaming pro-life. I identify myself as a Christian conservative male, but I do agree more on the left side of being pro-choice. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking, Trenton, you are a male, how are you credible to speak about this? And I'm here to say, you're right. But that's why I've done my research. This is a topic that I've witnessed in 2 presidential elections now. I've had an opinion about it for a while now. I did my research through scholarly articles. I read newspaper articles. I read different opinions on it. For my presentation, I have consulted the Constitution of the United States. I didn't consult the actual one, but I did a copy of it. I have watched videos and read blogs of political leaders and commentators in the United States. And lastly, I consulted the Bible actually about this topic. So today I would like to show you what I have found through research to support my pro-choice argument. I will first explain to you what it means to be pro-choice and what it doesn't mean to be pro-choice. I will show you what political leaders say about the issue and how the Constitution supports it. Lastly, I will show you how Christians can remain faithful to our God while supporting the pro-choice cause. So first, let's look at how the dictionary defines what it means to be pro-choice. So dictionary.com defines pro-choice as favoring legalized abortion as an option during pregnancy. Now, I went ahead and bolded and underlined the word option, because I'm going to really hit on that point for a second, and it's kind of the key takeaway. Being pro-choice does not mean that you are pro-abortion. Being pro-choice means that you do not believe it is the government's job to step in and tell a woman whether she can or cannot abort her child. I'm going to re-say that to stress the importance. Being pro-choice means that you do not believe it is the government's job to step in and tell a woman whether she can or cannot abort her child. So now that we have looked at what it means to be pro-choice and what it doesn't mean to be pro-choice, let's look at what some politicians and commentators and the Constitution have to say about this. So, quick survey, how many of you in here know who this woman is? Okay, how many of you in this room have no idea who this woman is? How many of you in here are like, she looks familiar, but I can't put a name to it? Alright, this lady is a 24-year-old, extreme conservative Christian female from Texas. Yeah, she is from Texas. But she recently was fired from her job, from her network. She's a commentator for, she was a commentator for The Blaze. She recently was just actually hired for MSNBC, which is kind of weird. But she was recently fired for her views of being pro-choice. They fired her because she is a conservative that is pro-choice, which I was shocked when I first heard it from her. But she brought some really, really good points to my attention that I decided to bring to your attention. She compared the idea of being pro-choice and the way that conservatives, she did bring that, but she fought it against the way that conservatives use the idea of conceal and carry. Conservatives typically try to fight for conceal and carry with the idea of a limited government. So what is a limited government? A limited government is a government that is set up to have limited power over its citizens. As Tommy pointed out, limited government originally implied that the notion of a separation of powers and system of checks and balances promoted by the U.S. Constitution. As part of the Bill of Rights, the 9th Amendment and the 10th Amendment, they spell out the principle of limited government. So what conservatives do is they argue that the government cannot step in and say whether you can own a gun or not. Tommy uses that same argument to say if the government can't tell you whether you can own a gun or not, they cannot tell you what you can or cannot do with your body. And specifically in her own words, as I'm not a male, so she says, stay out of my guns and stay out of my body. So now that we have seen what it means to be pro-choice and how it can be supported by the Constitution, let's look at how it lines up biblically. So in John 3:16 we are told, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life." I went ahead and underlined the word believe. So, the great thing about our religion is that Christianity is a choice. You are not forced to be a Christian. Nobody ever was forced to be a Christian. You come to be a Christian by your own choice. So, how that applies to this is we are taking a Christian standard and trying to force people who are not Christians to live by that standard. If a Buddhist wanted to have an abortion, it would not be fair for me to be like, I'm a Christian and I say that you can't have that abortion because having the abortion is against my religion. I don't know what Buddhists believe, I was just using that as an example. Today we've examined what it means to be pro-choice and what it does not mean. We looked at how it can be supported by the Constitution and also looked at how it can be looked at from a Christian perspective. As I mentioned earlier, being pro-choice does not mean that you are pro-abortion. Being pro-choice means that you believe the government should not decide whether a woman can or cannot abort her child, but she needs to come to that decision herself. Keep this in mind when listening to your next political debate. Thank you.
It was a late night last night. That assignment took so much longer than you thought it would, and having Netflix in the background didn't help either. Whatever the case, you got the assignment turned in and taken care of, but now you have your ADM to worry about. As if staying up late wasn't bad enough, now you have to get up early. You wake up to your alarm just fine, you get ready for the day and take your short walk to class. You've got your coffee with you. As you get your class materials out, you start taking notes. It seems like the coffee is keeping you awake for the most part, but slowly the effects seem less helpful until as college students, we've all been there. Staying awake in class, chapel, and meetings is tough because the right amount of sleep always seems to evade our grasp. A variety of problems face people when you try and get enough sleep to prepare for the day to come. As I mentioned in that brief story, we may have work or assignments due that just take longer than expected. We also have relationships to maintain, unexpected interruptions to our schedule, procrastination, and a host of other distractions. Besides being a college student who struggles with sleep on a regular basis, I have done research and gathered ideas from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Huffington Post, the National Sleep Foundation, and the National Adolescent and Young Adult Health Information Center. Today, my specific goal is to persuade you to get more than 7 hours of sleep on a regular basis. I want to acknowledge up front that some people may have disorders or problems with sleep that are out of their control. I understand that, and what I'll be focusing on in this presentation is the parts of your life that you do have control over. To do this, I will analyze how widespread sleep deprivation is and the cause of it, the effects of not getting enough sleep, and the potential solutions for how you can get the right amount of sleep. So, the first step to this problem is identifying it and understanding it. So, just how widespread is this sleep deprivation, and what's the cause of it? Before we can understand the statistics of how many people are suffering from sleep deprivation, we first have to define what sleep deprivation is. Sleep deprivation is simply not getting the sleep that your body needs, but that only answers half the question. How much sleep do people need? According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the amount of sleep needed varies from person to person and changes over time based on age. As teenagers, people generally need about 9 to 10 hours of sleep, and adults need roughly 7 to 8 hours. So how many adults are actually getting this much sleep? Huffington Post reports that in the U.S., more than a third of adults are not getting enough sleep and are technically qualified as being sleep deprived. That's more than 80 million people not getting enough sleep. What's the cause of this? Why are so many adults not getting enough sleep? A variety of factors contribute to this problem. First, there's work assignments and duties that have to get done. Several tasks simply have to get done within the course of a day, and sleep just seems to get pushed back and delayed more and more. Stress can certainly play a role in preventing sleep from occurring. Nights happen when there's so much going on in a person's brain that it makes it difficult to fall asleep. The pressures of upcoming assignments, difficult relationships, the uncertainty of the future, they can all bear down on people and make them less able to get the rest they need. Another reason is caffeine. At this you might be thinking, of course, that's what caffeine is supposed to do. And while you'd be right, There's a lot more that caffeine can do than just keep you awake for that extra hour or two. According to the National Sleep Foundation, caffeine can cause insomnia, sleep disturbances, and can have an unwelcome caffeine crash once its effects wear off. And that leads into my next point. With so many people dealing with sleep deprivation, what are the consequences of it? How does it affect people? The National Adolescent and Young Adult Health Information Center has a rather intimidating list of the potential effects of sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation can reveal itself in many ways, such as concentration difficulties, drifting off in class, short attention span, memory impairment, poor decision making, lack of enthusiasm, moodiness and aggression, depression, slower physical reflexes, reduced athletic performance, reduced academic performance, more sick days, and a variety of other undesirable bodily curses. The results of sleep deprivation sound like a medication commercial listing all of the possible side effects you could be diagnosed with. Now, that list may have been a little overwhelming. So, let's break it down from a few of the more notable side effects. A few things listed at the beginning, such as concentration difficulties, shortened attention span, and memory impairment, can be coupled with reduced academic performance. It's ironic that those extra hours you might be spending doing homework assignments could actually be preventing you from learning throughout the rest of the day. By having a late night simply paying attention, well, it can be hard to remember what you've learned and retain it. Lack of enthusiasm, moodiness, and depression could all be placed under one subcategory as well. Your emotions can get out of hand when you've been deprived of the sleep your body needs. You could have a roller coaster of emotions within the course of a day without being sleep deprived. When you miss out on an hour or so of sleep, you might be more likely to have an emotional breakdown the next day. Drifting off and slower physical reflexes make a bad combination that can easily lead to car crashes. Up to this point, sleep deprivation has had a negative effect on your GPA, social life, and mental health, but now it can cause you serious bodily harm. Not getting enough sleep is a serious threat to not only your own safety, but the safety of others as well. So, now that we know what the problem is, and the effects it has, let's look at some of the practical solutions that can be taken to solve this problem. The first thing that needs to be done in order to get enough sleep is to decide that sleep is a priority. There are going to be times where you have to make tough decisions about what you value and what's most important to you. All these suggestions and solutions may sound nice and helpful, but they won't do you any good if sleep isn't a priority in your life. By committing to getting a certain amount of sleep each night, the foundation is laid on which all other decisions can be made. The rest of the suggestions I will give come from the National Sleep Foundation. One of those is to only sleep in your bed. If you're in bed, you should be sleeping rather than doing homework or working on your laptop. By doing this, your body will automatically know that when you get in bed, you're going to sleep and are not working on any other tasks. Another thing you can do, establish a schedule for sleeping and waking. Your body loves consistency. When you have a pattern of sleeping and waking at certain times, you'll have a much easier time doing both. The hard part about developing this pattern, though, is that it requires committing to waking up at whatever time, even on weekends. However, once you have that rhythm and consistency of your sleep schedule already established, it won't be as hard to wake up on the weekends because your body's already going to be prepared for it. Another thing, you can develop a routine before going to sleep. Rather than closing your laptop and immediately jumping in bed, have some sort of relaxing pattern to do before you go to sleep. It could be anything. You could do journaling for a few minutes before you go to bed. You could take a shower, listen to music. Whatever it is, though, make sure it doesn't require any extra mental effort. Following a relaxing routine can make it easier to fall asleep. And as hard as it may be, avoid eating less than 2 hours before going to bed. This can be a tough one. But by planning ahead, it can easily be accomplished. In conclusion, getting 7 hours of sleep, that's no easy task. We've seen how and why sleep deprivation is so widespread, the effects of it, and how it can be prevented. So now when you start thinking about what you're going to do over the weekend, put a few of these simple tips into practice and your weekdays will go much more smoothly. Thank you.
walking back to my room, I was trying to think of what I could do my speech on. I had not many good ideas, and as I'm thinking through, nothing was really jumping out to me. And I get back to Alpha, I open up my room, and immediately I become just super anxious. My room, as you can see, maybe, is a hot mess. I have a little mountain of clothes piling out of my closet, and yeah, I just have a bunch of random stuff laying around, a lot of random clutter, and I have hair care products, makeup, useless stuff that I never use, but for some reason I never put away. And to add to the stress, room checks was the following morning. So I decided that I really needed to just take a step back and just reevaluate the stuff that I allow into my life. And so I chose to spend this week as a minimalist, and I really focused on limiting my clothes and just all of the other stuff that I would give my focus to. In a world of bigger is better and the more the merrier, our minds have been warped into believing the lies that things, physical objects, give us meaning and can somehow boost our happiness. And stores feed off of this human tendency just to become dissatisfied so easily. Every month there are new fashion trends that come in style, and people feel the need to flood stores again. And I feel like technology also becomes a source of debt for many people. Just a few months ago, I was completely content with my iPhone 6, and it was in good condition. And then the iPhone 7 came out, and suddenly the iPhone 6 in my back pocket didn't give me that same satisfaction that it did just yesterday. And so we're wired to want more. And when we have that more, whatever that may be for you, we still crave something bigger, something better, because the more the merrier, right? The information that I will be presenting on comes from my experience this week, an interview with Kirsten Criswell, a documentary titled Minimalism, and a blog titled All My 111 Possessions. So I'm sure most, if not all of you, have just struggled with decluttering your life. So today I'm going to be explaining minimalism, what it means to me, what it means to others, and just the benefits that I've experienced through that. So before I dive into my process of minimalizing and the benefits that came with that, I'm going to explain what minimalism is and what that lifestyle entails. So minimalism, there's a lot jam-packed into just that one word. So I'm going to give you a very broad definition, which would be the intentional decision to live deliberately with less. So most minimalists only own what they need, the bare minimal, as well as anything that may bring them joy and pleasure, and joy into their life. So an example of this can be found in a man named Rob Greenfield. He has a really cool story and a blog. I would highly recommend you guys looking into that. But 5 years ago, he moved into a 3-bedroom apartment in California, and of course he decided to live in the biggest room in that apartment. It makes sense. And so he's moving in, and he brings all of his crap, all of his stuff into this apartment, and he puts it all in all of the closets, every single closet, in every single room. And he still has an excess amount. And so he, after going through a phase of just watching minimalist documentaries, reading books, and different blogs, he decided that he really wanted to challenge himself. And so every year he would minimalize more and more, and he got rid of his car, and eventually he went from barely fitting into the largest room in his apartment to comfortably moving into a 6x6 closet. And that includes all of his possessions that he had now minimalized a lot. And so in January of 2015, Rob moved into a tiny house, as you can see there, super cute. But yeah, he lived there for about a year, and he enjoyed it, and he was debt-free and off the grid, which sounds like crazy to me, like having no debt at all, and having just your day to yourself to do whatever you feel like you want to do. And he lived in this house for a year, and he's currently, that was only for a year, and then he traveled. He's currently traveling right now with every single possession he owns. He owns a total of 111 things, all pictured right here. And he can actually, it's really cool, he can put all of those items in that backpack to the left, and he can do like push-ups with every single possession that he owns, which is crazy to me. But find 1,000 of other similar stories of people who they've decided to just walk away from the life of consumerism. And I read dozens of stories, each one highlighting on the joy and freedom that came with letting go of our things, all of our crap. And yeah, it was awesome to see that this is becoming more and more of a thing. And so, now that you have a better understanding of what minimalism is, I'm going to explain my process of minimalizing. So going back to a week ago, I randomly decided that I was going to minimalize for a week. And this idea kind of just stressed me out because I had so much. Like I just looked around in my room and I had no idea where to even begin with this. And so, because I was so overwhelmed, I focused on one thing, which was clothing. And so I started this process by just emptying out all of my closets, my closet, all of my drawers, and I just laid it all out. You can see there to the left, all of my stuff, and I separated it into different piles. I had long sleeve shirts, short sleeve, pants, so on and so forth. And I actually counted up every single piece of clothing just so I could process and really realize how much I had. And then I decided on a certain number of things that I wanted to have for the week. And yeah, I ended up bagging it and I put it all in the trunk of my car because I did not want to cheat this week. And so yeah, that's what I did. And there's some pictures for visual people, but for the numbers people, I counted everything. Here to the left, you can see all the different categories, a total of 253 pieces of clothing I had, including shoes, including scarves. You can judge me, I am allowing you. And so I decided to go from 253 to 20. That's 8%, about 8% of everything that I have. So the following day, I minimized cups, and I went from 11 to 3. I was pretty practical with this. I decided on a travel mug, cup for water, and then just a mug to have in my room. And then I also minimalized hair care products. I think I had 20, no, I'm ridiculous. I think I had 25, and then I lowered that down to 7. Half of these, I didn't even know what they were. People just gave them to me, and I kept them. And I never even used them. I just kept them in my drawers because there's some other things to add. And so these were the main things that I actually used. So that wasn't much of a challenge. But yeah, that was the main things that I minimalized besides normal decluttering stuff. So now that you have some background on my process of minimalizing, I'm going to share what I learned. And while my experience holds weight, I also acknowledge I've only been a minimalist for a week. And there's only so much I know. I don't know everything about it, obviously. So I interviewed Kirsten Criswell, and she is the Director of Student Involvement here at Grace. She's a really cool woman. I would encourage you to get to know her. But she's been a minimalist for 6 years, and so I'm going to also share a little bit of her experiences and what she's learned as well. So I learned that minimalism decreases stress. The less you own, the less you really have to stress about. I would come back to my room, and I was always stressed with schoolwork. And it was really nice to come back to a room that was clean, it was neat, and I didn't have that clutter that I would feel like I would have to stress about. And suddenly my room became more of a safe haven, more of a comforting place, rather than, like I said, something that I would just stress about. And living simply allows you to reevaluate your priorities as well. As I was going through every piece of clothing that I owned, I began wondering, how did I get to this point? I didn't want to believe that I was materialistic or, maximalist. That's a word. Maximist. But my 253 pieces of clothing proved otherwise. So that was something that I really had to battle with this week, that I do put a lot of my priority in how I look, what I own. And so that was something that it really did break down something in me. And so that was awesome. And for Kirsten, minimalism is also about priorities and values. In her interview, she said, striving to live more minimally allows me to value things that matter. Life can get really cluttered, and minimalism helps me narrow and focus in on what is truly important. And I agree. I think simplifying my wardrobe gave me the opportunity to just take a step back and prioritize what I actually value as important. And so So there were a bunch of other things that I don't have time to talk about, but I would really encourage you to look into minimalism and figure out what that means to you. So today we looked at minimalism, what it means to be minimalist, and the benefits of this lifestyle. And as I've been preparing for the speech and processing what I want to say and how I want to present it, a line from the documentary Minimalism continued to just soften my heart. It says, use things and love people, because the opposite never works. So I hope that this week you can just find a way to simplify your life and to slow down and to really be deliberate with your time. Thank you.
On.
Lena Baker, Carlos De Luna, Larry Griffin, Ruben Cantoon, David Spence, Jesse Taffarano, Ellis Wayne Felker, Leo Jones, Cameron Todd Williamson, Leno Herenda. These are 10 individuals that were executed for crimes that they were later found innocent for. 10 people that have mothers and fathers, daughters, sons. They are mothers and fathers. They are cousins. They are brothers. They not only missed out on their children's first steps, their teenagers' first dates, they also missed funerals of their parents. They also had their reputations tarnished forever. We've all heard the word death penalty. We all sit here today with preconceived ideas of what that means, whether we've heard it called the death penalty, capital punishment, death by electric chair, or death by lethal injection. We all have some thought in our mind, whether we think it's legal or illegal, right or wrong, moral or immoral. Over the last few years, taking an assortment of criminal justice classes here at Grace College, I found an extreme fascination in what capital punishment or death penalty is, what the morale is. Is this biblical or is it not? Do people deserve this, or it just grew something in me that I couldn't decide what I thought about the death penalty. I've listened to TED Talks, I've listened to podcasts, I've read articles, and for this research project, I read from the National Geographic, I read the Innocence Project website, I read the Witness to Innocence website. I also gathered biblical research done by Dr. Ratza, who's a professor here at Grace College. Many of you know him to be a great theologian, but he's also a professor of urban sociology and other classes that deal with these moral boundaries. My goal today is to share with you why I believe the death penalty should be illegal in all 50 states. I want to share statistics with you, as well as talk to you about what the Bible has to say. I also want to tell you that this hits closer to home than I think you might realize. 20 people in the last 2 decades have been executed in Indiana alone. Now, while this doesn't pertain particularly to Indiana, my whole speech will be dealing with America. These are all people's faces. I want you to know that each person that has been influenced by this does have a face, and I want to share pictures with you. Each person on this sheet of paper was on death row for crimes they did not commit. They were either within months, days, years, some of them just a few hours away from being executed before their lawyers found them to actually be innocent. They were going to be executed for crimes, again, they did not commit. As I went on to read and research for this project, I realized that 32 states in our country practice the death penalty, including Indiana and our neighbors, Ohio, Illinois, and Kentucky. Over the last 100 years, many people, whether on death row or serving time for just petty crimes like robbery, have been let go, finding that they were innocent. Since the birth of modern technologies such as DNA testing, there have been 18 people assisted alone just by DNA testing that were on death row that got out of prison. These aren't people that found out they had false witnesses or false testimonies. 18 people alone had DNA testing bring them out of prison when they were on their way to being executed. These 18 people served a combined time of 229 years behind bars for crimes they didn't commit. Not only did they miss out on major parts of their lives, their children's lives, their parents' lives, but again, their tarnished reputations affected them once they were brought out back into the real world. I read an article from National Geographic stating that the United States is ranked 5th for the highest number of executions per year. We're right behind China, Iran, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia. And I don't know about you, but I don't want our country to be in a list with any of those countries on anything. President Obama in 2015 was quoted saying, "In the application of the death penalty in this country, we have seen significant problems. Racial bias, uneven application of the death penalty, situations where individuals on death row have been seen innocent. These are all raised questions onto how the death penalty should be applied." I also read an article from the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science in the United States of America, written by 4 law students, that said, "The rate of wrongful convictions of innocent criminal defendants is often described as not merely unknown, but unknowable. Because not only do some of these people become executed before we realize that they're innocent, but sometimes they were unable to prove their innocence. Many criminals never prove innocent before their case is fully finished, or they die while in prison. The sheer strength of death being threatened on them is why these criminals more often reach out to lawyers or organizations to fend for help, whereas if you're in prison for a lesser crime where the death penalty is not a threat, they might not reach out to the outside world if parole or being let go is in the near future. Many criminals, or non-criminals as these people are, reach out to an organization called the Innocence Project. The Innocence Project exonerates the wrongly convicted through DNA testing and making reforms in the criminal justice system to prevent future injustices. So not only does the Innocence Project reach out and help these individuals, but they're also making steps to change the general judicial system and how it's working right now. The mission statement, located on the Innocence Project website, says, "The Innocence Project mission is to free the staggering number of innocent people who remain incarcerated and bring reform to the system responsible for their unjust imprisonment." The Innocence Project is about exonerating, and exonerating just means to bring people out of prison. To exonerate, to improve, to reform, and to support. And again, I realize I keep saying this term, crimes they did not commit, because I really want to hit home that these people are serving time for crimes they did not commit. There are other people out in the real world that did commit the crime that they're being punished for. Now I want to show you some of the research that I gathered and talked with Dr. Ratza about. It's going to seem like I'm going to go through a lot of Bible verses, but please stick with me. In Genesis 9:6, we see that God instituted the death penalty. "Whoever sheds the blood of a man, by man shall his blood be shed, because man was made in God's image." Next, the death penalty was authorized for hating one's parents. Exodus 21:15 says, "Whoever strikes his father or mother shall be put to death." Next, the death penalty was authorized for kidnapping and human trafficking. In Exodus 21:16, "Whoever steals a man and sells him, and anyone found in possession of that man shall be put to death." In Deuteronomy 21:20, we see, "But the prophet who presumes to speak a word in the name of God that God did not command him to speak, who speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet shall be put to death." Throughout the Bible, the death penalty was authorized for sexual crimes, such as incest, adultery, homosexuality, and rape. The rule of retaliation was also shown to us in Exodus 21, which states the eye for the eye concept that we often hear. So, after you read through these, it's pretty obvious to see that the death penalty is biblical. If we can prove that there's no bias, no prejudice, no sexism, no racism, all the way from the 911 operator to the first police officer on the scene, to the judges, to the lawyers, to the lab workers handling the evidence, to all 12 jury members, then the death penalty should be used. But our judicial system is not perfect. As we can see, there's many people that have been killed for crimes they didn't commit. And as I leave you, I want you to think about those passages. The death penalty is biblical. When we can say in all certainty that a man took the life of another man with no prejudice, with no racism, sexism, or bias all the way through, then the death penalty should be used. All the people and faces that I showed you at the beginning, all the names I read, those were all people that were or almost were killed for crimes they didn't commit. The death penalty should be illegal because our judicial system is not perfect.
On.
Good afternoon, boa tarde, buenas tardes, bonjour. How many of you know how to speak a second language? According to Annie Merritt, a well-known writer for the British Journal Telegraph says, learning a foreign language is more than just a helpful skill for traveling. It will make you smarter, more decisive, and even better at English. It is possible to say that most of the people in America have the chance to study a new language, but sometimes they do not strive for it. They might think that will not be useful for them because they plan to live in their home country forever, but this is not true. Everyone can gain a lot by learning a new language, and even though they will not live in another country, the benefits will come for the individual and also for the surrounding people. I am a good example of a person that learned another language and gained so much benefit from it. It will be my 4th year living in another country and speaking another language daily. As you can hear, my accent would be a perfect example of this topic. If I did it, and you can do it too. After looking over several expert researches, I was able to find a very interesting article done by Bernard Morris, an expert in foreign language and a writer for the University of North Carolina. She concluded that psychological studies have found that speaking 2 or more languages is a great asset to the cognitive process. There are many reasons why we should learn a foreign language. Today, I would like to share with you several benefits that you and the society can gain from it. Some examples of the benefits that I will explain more are that learning a new language makes your decision more rational. You can get a better understanding on cultural issues, and will also be beneficial for your career. As I mentioned before, there are several self-benefits that a person can gain by learning a foreign language, and today I will share some of them. For example, your memory improves. According to Annie Merritt, she wrote a lot of benefits about new language. She's an expert in studying people's behavior after they learn a new language. And with that being said, she wrote a very interesting article on the education section. According to her research, several educators often liken the brain to a muscle because it will function better with exercise. And learning a language involves memorized rules and vocabulary, which helps strengthen the mental muscle. This exercise improves overall memory, which means that several bilinguals are better at remembering lists or sequence. I don't know if that's true. According to her research, bilinguals are also better at retaining shopping lists, names, and directions. Shopping lists can be true. Second, you become more perceptive. According to her, learning a new language can help you at several situations in life. She was able to find a research done by Spain's University of Pompeu, stating that bilingual people are better at observing their surroundings. That's true. They are more adept at focusing on relevant informations and editing out the irrelevant. They are also better at pointing misleading information. Lastly, your decision-making skills improve. According to a study done by the University of Chicago, bilinguals tend to make more rational decisions. The new language can influence your judgment because of the bias that the language provides. Also, bilinguals are more confident with their choices after thinking it over in the second language and seeing whether their initial conclusion is still up. I think at this point, you might be questioning yourself, why I did not learn a foreign language early in my life. Well, it's never too late to learn a foreign language, and will not just benefit you, but also the society. We can look over several examples that will benefit the society. For example, According to Bernard Morris, an expert in foreign language and a writer for the University of North Carolina, to be competitive on a global scale, the business world of tomorrow needs individuals that can work with a culturally diverse environment and who have strong skills in foreign language. Knowing another language provides a competitive edge in career choices in today's and tomorrow's world. Additionally, many businesses are looking for people who are proficient in another language. Second, cultural understanding. I am an example of this aspect. After learning a new language, I learned much more about other cultures. I learned how to accept people's opinions that do not have the same beliefs as me. And Bernard Morris also wrote for the University of North Carolina that language have the power to promote understanding between people of different cultural backgrounds. The study of another language helps students develop a sense of cultural pluralism, openness to, and appreciation of other culture. Lastly, diversity. She also mentioned in her studies, Bernard Morris, that in the world of tomorrow, managers who know how to deal with a diverse workforce will be very successful. The workplace of tomorrow will be a world of many cultures and languages. And in my opinion, diversity is good for everyone. Being surrounded by people that speak several languages can give you motivations to learn new languages, and you also learn a lot from them. So far, we can conclude that learning a new language will not give you any negative insights, but just positive. As students, we also tend to gain a lot from learning a new language. You will not just enhance your career opportunities, but you will also do better in your first language. Looking to our student point of view, you might think that you don't have time to study a new language right now. But according to a data from the admission testing program of the College Board, while you are in college, you can learn a new language faster than you think because of the background that you gained from high school. And also, according to the Louisiana Report on Foreign Language and Basic Skills, showed that regardless of student race, sex, or academic level, students in foreign language classes outperforms those who were not taking any foreign languages. Lastly, this can also enhance your career opportunity. Bernard Morris concluded her studies mentioning that to know another language will be a valuable tool for your work and will also cooperate with all your career in college. So today you learned more about the benefits that you and the society can gain by learning a foreign language. As you could see, it's very beneficial to you to step out of your comfort zone and learn about others. You will automatically do this while learning a new language. The value of such education not lies in job preparation, but also in developing an understanding of people and culture. So I encourage you to learn a new language because it will open several doors into your life and that you never thought you could have it. And if you need any advice or anything related to learning a new language, I would be available to help you with everything that I can. Thank you.
On.
Imagine you woke up today and President Bill Cative had sent out a campus-wide email stating that all classes, labs, chapel, and any other school activities were canceled for the day. It'd be pretty great, right? Well, what would you do with the time given? Would you play some video games? Why not just lay in bed all day eating snacks and watching Netflix or Hulu to get further into that amazing show that you're so invested in? Doesn't that sound so relaxing? Isn't that a great idea? Perhaps, but perhaps not. We all either attend college or teach at a college, and being part of college requires significant amount of time on computers to write papers, watch PowerPoints, do research, grade things, and more. Also, everyone nowadays has a phone, most of which are smartphones that have pretty big screens. And smartphones have lots of apps like games and social media that get us looking onto our screens even more. TVs in our dorm rooms, in our lobbies, projectors in classes, iPods, tablets, Kindles, Technology is so advanced, and this allows us to have many reachable screens that we unfortunately look into for multiple hours a day. After reading and looking into many different articles to become more knowledgeable on this topic, I feel as though I am able to share with you vital information on the idea of too much screen time. I will be using my information from the Kids Health website, the Mayo Health Clinic website, the Natural Health website, Time Health magazine, and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. After reading and researching, I have learned that there are two main negative effects of too much screen time that I will be sharing with you today. But first, I will discuss how much screen time is too much and why it is even a problem. Second, I will explain the causes and negative effects, and then finally, I will try to persuade you to use the alternatives that I will be giving. First, I'm going to explain how much time is too much time and why it is even bad. Well, according to the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute and the American Academy of Pediatrics, people should limit their leisure screen time to no more than 2 hours a day. However, according to the Vision Council, nearly 90% of Americans use their devices for at least 2 hours a day. And I have two graphs here today from the National Center for Health Statistics. And the first one shows the average of what percentage people use in their daily hours of TV watching and computers. And the second graph within the same research shows that both females and males use computers and watch TVs, roughly the same amount. So those of you who are thinking that guys play video games for a much greater time span than girls who are scrolling through Pinterest, or vice versa, you're wrong. It actually ends up balancing out to be pretty even. So why is watching a screen such a big problem? Well, according to researcher Mandy Oaklander for Time Health magazine, it is the blue light that is emitted by these devices that causes such a problem. This blue light, which is very similar to ultraviolet, has been known to cause damage to the cells inside of our eyes. Also, because it is a screen, there are pixels that create the image that we see. And these pixels are difficult for our eyes to focus on, which causes the strain. Now that we know that being in front of the screen should require a limited time, let us look at the consequences of what can happen if we go longer than that recommended time. After doing all of my research, I noticed that there were two main consequences that negatively affect us by being in front of the screen for too long. The first problem is that too much screen time can cause weight gain or obesity. According to Kids Health, those who consistently spend 4 or more hours in front of a screen are more likely to be overweight. Uses of electronic devices require us to be standing still or sitting down. And if we're sitting with our electronics for multiple hours a day, that increases our chances of weight gain because we are not moving around and exercising. Again, from Kids Health, health experts have linked too much screen time to obesity because we often sit and eat snacks while we're watching or playing video games, which also heightens the chances for obesity or weight gain because when we're watching something, we're not paying attention and we're just eating snacks without being hungry and we're rarely active. Not only does too much screen time allow for a better chance of obesity, but the second, and probably the most important, negative effect is that an excessive amount of being in front of a screen can cause vision problems. Going back to Mandy Oaklander's article about the blue light, which again is very similar to ultraviolet light, she says how it can cause strains to the eye. The pixels on all digital screens can cause the eyes to strain because it's harder for them to focus on pixels that are moving rather than looking at just still words on a page. Words on a page don't move, but pixels on the screen are always changing. So our eyes try to stay focused on those pixels, but they strain to keep up. After surveying more than 10,000 adults, the Vision Council learned that 65% of Americans experience digital eye strain, like dry eyes, irritated eyes, blurred vision, and headaches after hours of staring at a screen. Also, having digital devices, such as our smartphones, laptops, close to our faces decreases the amount of times we blink in a minute, which also adds to the eye strain and dryness. Our eyes were not created to look at pixels and blue light, but rather our eyes were created to look at nature and our surroundings. So when we use our eyes on something that we weren't created for a long period of time, our eyes will of course be in some sort of hurt and pain. After seeing the problems that can be caused through too much time on screens, I urge you to listen to the following advice to lower your chances of the negative effects of obesity and straining of the eyes. Thankfully, there are a variety of solutions to help with excessive screen time. First and foremost, you could stop using digital devices as much. But since that's unlikely here at college, here are some more practical solutions. Try to keep TVs and computers out of the bedroom as much as possible. Kind of going back with what Micah said, if you're in the room and on your screen, you're just kind of doing it whatever, and you're not actually thinking and allowing your body to relax when it needs to. And I know this can seem excessive, however, if you make it a rule not to watch TV or play games on your computer in your room, then the amount of time spent in front of a screen will significantly decrease. Also, you should not eat in front of TV or watching or playing video games, because eating in front of the screen increases how much TV will be watched, and it will increase the amount of food intake, because again, we're not paying attention to how much we're eating. And fourth, we should be active with our screen time. Some people can do like simple workouts while they're watching TV, like sit-ups, yoga, or whatever. And doing those things after a video game or after each episode of Gilmore Girls or whatever, it can easily help with being active and not just sitting around all day. And finally, you should practice the 20-20-20 rule. The Vision Council reminds us that there is a way to protect our eyes while we are in front of a screen, and it is called the 20-20-20 rule. For every 20 minutes that you are in front of your screen, you should take a 20-second break to look 20 feet away to relax the focusing muscles in your eyes. So after 2 of these speeches that you would see today with a PowerPoint, you should look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds. And that's why I decided to not use a PowerPoint today, so that your eyes could relax and be helped with that. These simple little ideas could help you in so many significant ways. So today I shared with you information on screens. We explored how much is too much, what the negative effects of too much are, and some helpful hints on how to better our time in front of the screens. In conclusion, we today use digital screens way too much, and it is causing problems that people might not be linking to TV time or computer time. But now that you've heard, I urge you to tell others what you learned today, and I would also challenge you to use the advice and decrease your screen time. I'm going to end with a quote from Brian Kim, who is an author of many self-improvement books. He says, "Watching too much television truly is one of the most dangerous drugs out there on the market today, and the sad thing is, most people don't even realize it." Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Isaiah Boyle. As many of you know, I'm a criminal justice major here. What I'm about to talk to you about is very important to me, as I am currently enrolling into the police academy this coming August, and I'm also a person of minority. First, I would like to ask you guys a question. How many of you guys had an encounter with the police, like before in your life?
Yeah.
Who was willing to share about this encounter? Meredith?
I got pulled over last summer because I ran a red light. But like the cop was like super nice because I had never been pulled over before, so I was like, "I'm so sorry," and I like told him I had never been pulled over before, and obviously he can like look at that stuff, so like all I got was a warning, so it was nice. And he was nice about it.
Deb?
When I was 8, a police officer came to an art class I was in and lectured us all about not calling 911, which I don't think anyone did, but he gave us all a lecture about how it was bad. If it's not real, like 911 wasn't real.
Alright, I don't hear this one.
So back when I was 5, and right after my brother and I were adopted, my parents got married. And at their wedding reception, my brother and I were playing with the payphones, and we didn't know that you had to pay to call 911.
Oh, jeez.
And the police showed up to my parents' wedding reception. It was fun. It was fun.
Did they stay?
I remember them being there. I remember them like lecturing us, but I blamed it on my brother, and then we did because he's older, so.
I would have tried to stay and get some free food or something. Alright, most of us in here have had some type of encounter with the police, whether good or bad. Many times I feel like as people, when we first meet someone, we kind of get this picture of them and we kind of tend to judge them a little too quickly, whether it's a good kind of judge or a bad kind of judge, but we get this idea of who they are. And sometimes if it's a bad encounter, we tend to write them off or write the group off right away because of like one person's actions. I have researched many websites like pewresearch.org and NLEOMF, which is National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. I've also discussed an issue with 2 police officers I know, Sergeant Miller and Sergeant Brown, and even someone who's had a bad experience with law enforcement and is a proud supporter of Black Lives Matter, but is also a proud supporter of the police. During this presentation, I'd like to share with you guys my encounter with law enforcement, a problem that is going on today, and how it affects police officers, and how you guys can support your local police departments, sheriff's departments, and also Black Lives Matter. When I first started this presentation, I asked you guys to share your own personal encounters with law enforcement, whether good or bad. Now I'm going to share my own. I remember 2 summers ago, I was on my way home from my grandma's house. She lives by the lake, and I just drive a beat up old black GMC Sonoma truck, and I had like a cutoff on, you know, because we were at the lake, and I had my hat on backwards, and I probably looked like I was up to no good. But I wasn't really thinking much of it. I saw a sheriff's deputy come towards my way, and I was driving. We're about to pass each other, and I was just like, "Cool, sheriff," you know. I didn't think much of it because I was driving the speed limit. I was 100 feet away from the person in front of me, and I had the windows down, and I was just listening to country music, you know, feeling pretty good. And that's all of a sudden, when I look right in my rearview mirror, I see him like do a quick U-turn automatically, and I was like, "Oh no, someone's about to get it." And I was like, kind of giggled to myself, and then I was like, "Shoot, he's directly behind me." So I pulled over, and I was super friendly with the guy. I'm like, "You know, officer, you know, like all that, like how your parents teach you, like respect the officers and stuff like that." But immediately, he just started hounding me. He's like, "Where are you going? Where have you been? What do you have in the car?" And I go, "Do you know why I pulled you over today?" I go, "No, I don't actually." He goes, "You have a light in the back of your truck, right in the top, you know, like the little brake light you have back up there." He said, "That's out." And my first thought was, how would he see that if he's coming to me? Because it wasn't after like a little ways, he's automatically just turned and followed me. So I was like really skeptical about that. But anyways, I tried to be as polite as I could. And he ended up writing a ticket, which I was not very happy about. I later went to the DMV or Secretary of State, wherever you go to pay tickets, and I found out that after I paid for the ticket, he wrote that I was Caucasian, which I thought was interesting because some police officers, like, they can type it in, swipe your card, put the information in computers. But this one was a handwritten ticket that I was given right then and there, and obviously he knew I was a Caucasian. So I was pretty upset about that. I was very angry. My mom was she was way more upset than I was. Because obviously I was racially profiled somehow right there. And I was pretty upset, and I was still looking into the police stuff, and like I was like, my thoughts started to go down like that. But then I realized that I had some good stuff happen in my life where I was able to communicate and have interactions with police that have been good. Like I've seen them personally firsthand from my internship with them, how they help people and all this kind of stuff. But people don't normally see that, and that's when I realized that people tend to only see one issue, only incident, like isolated issues that are throughout the nation. And I believe that this is because of the media. The media only shows these videos because it tries to get people to get them riled up. They like feed off of that. Like you're gonna see a video of someone helping someone across the street, or you're gonna see someone shooting someone, you know, that was a different color, and then people are gonna blow up. That's why the media does that, so they can get more attention and more people to see that. So the problem isn't just that there's a race issue, but that it's becoming a never-ending cycle that is just continuing to get worse and worse and worse. And no solution has come about this. People are starting to dislike the police more and more every day because of isolated incidences around the nation, which makes the police more stressed and more tense because more people are getting angry, which is not helping them do their job properly, which can make people not like them even more. As I said before, it's a cycle that just continues to grow. Pew Research did a survey for 7,917 officers, and this is affecting them because lately 93% of those officers have become more concerned about their safety. And this is true because I remember for my internship, I got in the car with an officer, Officer Hansford, and he asked me, at first I thought he was joking, but he's like, "Hey, if something goes down, you know how to shoot a gun, right? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, he's like, but for real? I'm like, yeah. Part of me was like excited for that, cause it's like, I wanna shoot. But then part of me was like, this is for real. Cause just down the road, there's a place called St. Joe. I don't know if any of you guys have heard about that. It's kind of closer to Michigan City kind of area, like kind of border line over there. There was 2 county clerk officers that got shot. And a lot of people in the Hastings Police Department that I worked at knew these people. Like they were mentors, so it was pretty close to home. So like, and all the whole Dallas shooting and all that stuff had gone on. So people, like the police were pretty high strung right then and there. Every officer I rode was very more tense than normal. This research also found out that 3/4 say their colleagues are reluctant to use force now. An example of this would be back in October 16th, there was a woman who decided not to use deadly force when she could have, and it was appropriate to. She decided not to because she didn't want to be backlashed by the media, have her family embarrassed, or have the department be scrutinized for her actions. And this led to her almost being beaten to death. So, what I'm trying to get at is, there's 2 things going on now. There's this, you see on the internet, Black Lives Matter and Back the Blue. A lot of times you see like people saying like, oh, like if you read the comments, which I'm not gonna say you should because it's pretty bad, but a lot of times they bash each other and it seems more of like it's like a war going on. And it's just really discouraging for me to see that, especially as, although I'm not as like affected as much as the Black Lives Matter group, I'm still affected somewhat, but not as bad. So, and then seeing the police, so I can like see both sides, it's just really affected me, because it's like, we're all going about this the wrong way. Like, I understand with Black Lives Matter, and I understand with the police. Like, I just feel like we're going about this the wrong way, and that, there needs to be something different going on, because obviously, like, rioting and bashing and, like, hating each other is not gonna help. And I interviewed one of my friends who is black, and his views on this, and he's a very proud, Black Lives Matter person. His view is that you can support both, because just because you're supporting one doesn't mean you support the other. He is a really good example. He said, if you're at a cancer rally and you're rallying for like cancer like awareness and stuff like that, you're gonna have signs and people are gonna be all like, you know, crazy about it, you know, like showing awareness, we need to do this. He says, but then if you get someone who has an AIDS poster, you're gonna be looking at them like, what are you doing here? So he's saying, it's not that it doesn't matter, it's just saying they're trying to focus on a certain aspect. So they're not saying that cops' lives don't matter. They're not saying that this doesn't matter. They're just trying to spread more awareness. And a lot of time people think that what they're doing is just saying that their lives are the only ones that matter, and that's not it at all. His view was on where it says in John 13:34-35, he believes that this could be like one of the big things that could really help the nation. John 13:34-35 says, a new command I give you is love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. So clearly this talks about loving. So I believe that there are a few things that we need to do as believers in Christ. We need to be doing this every day. We need to show love to everyone. We need to be representatives of Christ. There are actually many ways you can help with this. You might not be a cop or someone of a different race, but you can still make a difference. First off, like you can donate money to organizations who have for families, to give money to families who have lost a fallen officer, whether brother, sister, mom, or aunt, or something like that. But you can also be open-minded and show support for both sides. Just because you support one doesn't mean you don't support the other. You can also be a light during discussion. Instead of adding hostility and anger to this, you can be a light and show Christ and love and be open-minded and understand what everyone is saying. But most importantly, I'm asking you guys to pray. Prayer can do a lot of things. So today we discussed the problem that was going on today, and we talked about how the police are greatly affected by this and how you can help.